This RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by Brett Young. Change the game with BY7204LL, Brett Young's newest canola hybrid with Liberty Link technology.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio.
Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am your host for the day, Lyndsey Smith. That's right, your regular host, Sean Haney, is away today, so I get to take the reins. And it has been a wonderful week. I got to host Tuesday and Wednesday, and now, of course, today, I get to host the Issues Panel. So joining me later in the show, you're going to hear from Andrew Campbell. He's a dairy farmer out of Strathroy, and, of course, he jumps on the show for the Issues Panel every couple weeks. Haven't heard from him in a while, so excited to hear how his summer has gone. We've also, of course, got Kelvin Heppner with RealAgriculture out of Altona, Manitoba. He's going to join me as well. We have a lot to talk about. We have updates on the China investigation into the dumping of Canadian canola into China. I want to know about whether or not Trudeau is actually in a place where he could step down before the next election, so we'll ask about that. There is a discussion that the U.S. may, in fact, ground DJI drones in the country. What could that mean for agriculture there, and would Canada have to follow suit? All of that and much more up for the Issues Panel today. I also have a product spotlight with Mark Smith. He's the CFO of Genesis Fertilizers. You'll hear that in the third segment. As always, if you've got feedback on today's show or any of the shows that we've had this week, you can give us a call, 1-855-776-6147, or you can zip us an email. I'm at lsmith@realagriculture.com, and your regular host, Sean Haney, is shaney@realagriculture.com. And of course, you can find us across social media. We are on YouTube, and if you're watching on YouTube, hello. We're, of course, on X, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, you name it, we're there. So drop us a DM. Our Paige Warner Holmquist, she manages all of our social media. She'll get you in touch with us. And thank you to everyone who has been in touch recently. We've got just so much to talk about. All right, without further ado, let's get to a break, and I'll be back with the Issues Panel right after this.
At Vaterstad, we aim to be the world's leading partner for outstanding emergence. We're doing that through innovative tillage, planting, and seeding equipment that's optimized for your field conditions and soil types. We also offer industry-leading capacities to help you get the job done in shorter windows of time. It's all designed to give your crop the best start possible so you can maximize yields. Vaterstad, we look forward to growing together.
The Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com has everything you need to get your crop off to a great start and a strong finish. Whether you're growing chickpeas, faba beans, lentils, or peas, you'll get all the latest and best agronomic information at PulseSchool.com. A library of top-notch agronomy videos from industry experts available on demand at your fingertips. Visit the Pulse School, brought to you by BASF on RealAgriculture.com.
Advanced canola trait technology is here. And it's soon to be the talk of the town. Optimum Glide delivers excellent yield potential and agronomic trait performance. Improved crop safety. Enhanced weed control. And a wider window of application. You're going to want to see this. Learn more at OptimumGlide.ca.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio. I am your host for the day, Lyndsey Smith. And before I bring in the issues panel, we've got an important notice for grain farmers. The Canadian Grain Commission has revoked the licenses of Purely Canada Foods Corp. If this company owes you money for grain deliveries, call 1-800-853-6705 immediately. This is a message from the Government of Canada. All right, as promised, let us bring in the Friday Issues panel. Joining us from Strathroy, Ontario, it's some random dairy farmer, Andrew Campbell. How are you, Andrew?
I am wonderful, Lyndsey. How's everything in Eastern Ontario?
You know, it is beautiful. It has been your typical farm show week weather. Mist and fog in the morning, quite cool, and then lava hot and humid in the afternoon.
Which is for us in this part of the province is like the nicest weather we've had. I could have used this in May or June or July or August, but here we have it in September.
Yeah, did not get it. So how, obviously you're more than just a dairy farmer. I've seen you on some commercials even, which we should talk about at some point. But how did the summer hay season go? Because mine wasn't great either, I'll be honest.
As long as you like hay that's been rained on, it's been good. If you don't like that, I shouldn't say it, because there were windows. We got some hay off. The hay is actually decent, and there is a ton. There is so much of it. And I think that's probably the thing, is we have a whole lot of decent to mediocre hay. And so in terms of inventory, I don't know if I've ever had this much. So it's not the worst thing. It just has been that case of, and I'm sure you've had it too, as have lots, is that you sit around for 2 weeks and then do nothing but work for a whole week, and then sit around for 2 weeks and then go all out again. And that's kind of been the summer. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Sounds like beef cow hay. But you have a dairy, so that's a problem.
I would say it's better than beef cow hay.
Oh, okay.
It's almost sheep hay. Like, it's almost that good.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Also part of the issues panel, someone who knows nothing about hay, and he is smarter for it, is Kelvin Heppner out of Altona, Manitoba. How are you, Kelvin?
Doing well here, Lyndsey. And yeah, that's right. I do not know a whole lot about hay, although this year we have a ton of straw in at least this part of Western Canada. I'm hearing it in other areas too. Combining has been, combines have had to earn their keep this year, battling through all the straw because we had rain early in the season. So there's a lot of straw there. The heat later in the season and taps turning off later maybe hurt some of the yield, but certainly lots of straw. We do actually do some baling for on the straw side of things, not on the hay side of things. So we did get a lot of straw off the field this year.
Mm-hmm. You're smarter though, Kelvin, honestly. Hay is very stressful and it's very expensive. Things always break. So yeah.
We have a camper that our family likes to use, so I have a hard time imagining
trying to get hay done.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one or the other. It is not both. You may not have both. So there you go. And yeah, Kelvin, I definitely think the biomass issue, definitely one in Ontario as well, as people were going through the wheat crop. Straw will be in ample supply. But yeah, combines definitely struggled with that. What do we call it? MOG. Material other than grain. That's what MOG stands for. It's
really?
It's one of my favorite acronyms in agriculture is MOG, material other than grain. Okay, there were other things happening this week beyond us complaining about the weather. But before we get there, just quickly, it is Friday the 13th, in case you guys didn't know. So now you can be superstitious, but I wanted to start there. Andrew, is this a lucky day or an unlucky day? Do you have any Friday the 13th superstitions?
I do not. I tend to. I wouldn't call it either. In fact, it was one of those things of the situation. So we live on a county road, and I always know when it's Friday the 13th about 8 or 9 in the morning, because there are a lot of motorcycles going by today. They are all going down to Port Dover. And so usually that's how I find out, is not by good or bad luck, is by the fact is, why is everybody on a motorcycle at 8:30 in the morning in the fog? Mm-hmm. It's because they're going down to Port Dover.
There you go. That is a thing. I didn't realize until moving here that it is. It's a thing. Kelvin, any superstitions over there? Now that I can say the word.
I don't have any real superstitions around it. No, although the thought just crossed my mind that I think it might be a friend's birthday, so I need to double check.
Yeah,
that's
Facebook is good for that. It reminds you. I used to be somewhat superstitious because that was fun, but my son was born on a Friday the 13th, so I decided now. Elliot was born on January 13th, a Friday, and now I've decided it's a good thing. So now I don't worry about it so much. But yeah, there you go. Okay, let's talk about. There's been some stuff happening with Canadian politics. I don't know if you've noticed, Andrew, but I wanted to point out, just after we recorded last Friday's Issues panel, Kelvin published a fantastic op-ed that I really wanted to see in mainstream media. And Kelvin, I think let's go with imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. There were several other op-eds that really had the same vein of it is time for Trudeau to step down. Kelvin, you did try very hard, and I think you did well to not be partisan on this, to offer the balanced approach of why it's time Trudeau must go. Can you summarize that for us now?
I think the column was largely inspired by our conversation on last Friday's issues panel, talking about how the federal government right now, the Liberals, sure seem to be lacking energy and lacking life and lacking new ideas and inspiration, and so. As that drags out, we're falling further behind as a country in certain key files. And the example that was referenced in the column was the trade talks with the U.S. and Mexico, the upcoming review of NAFTA and USMCA or CUSMA, whichever term you want to use whatever name you want to give it. We still don't haven't agreed on the name even almost 6 years later. But yeah, that's one example where there could be major preparation happening. Canada needs to be prepared going into this upcoming renegotiation, whether it's Trump or Harris administration in the U.S. And that's an example of where the Trudeau government is tired, it seems, and hasn't been investing resources like it should be. That's just one example. And we saw with the Liberal caucus retreat this week that they sure seem to be standing by Trudeau. Nobody is rising up against him. But at the same time, there isn't a lot of inspiration or new ideas, and the polls continue to show that the Liberals are as low as they. In some parts of the country, you add the Liberal and NDP total together, and the Conservatives still have a higher number than that, and that's something we haven't seen in years, if ever, in Canada.
Mm-hmm. Andrew, even so, the people who are perhaps encouraging the Prime Minister to step down are former cabinet ministers like Catherine McKenna, who her comment on, hey, say thanks and go speak on the speaking circuit and make some money, which is a bit of it's true, but also a bit of a smack in the face coming from a former cabinet minister. Andrew, your thoughts on why it is time for Trudeau to step down not take us all the way through an election, to step down before an election?
Well, I think Kelvin hit everything in both the column and just now too, in terms of just this entrenched ideas. I think it's not even necessarily from what I see that they're out of fresh ideas. It's they're so committed to the ideas that they introduced over the last decade that they're unwilling to actually move the needle past them, because whether they feel that it's defeat. That they're saying it didn't work, whether they're admitting failure, whatever the reason, they're just so entrenched on all of these ideas. I did read another column. I think it was actually just even the editorial out of the Globe and Mail that basically said, like, there's a lot of opportunity here with Mark Carney coming in and starting to advise. The challenge is the advice he's going to give goes against everything that they have said, and not necessarily against, but says, dynamics have changed. Things need to evolve with it, and I just don't see them doing that. And so I think that, yeah, absolutely, it's a case of should have been done. I question now, though, with the NDP pulling their support, out of the supply and confidence agreement, that, like, is it too late now? Like, is it actually possible for him to do it? Because now at any time, there could be an election. And if it was almost any party, maybe outside of the NDP, I would be like, yes, let's do this election when you have no leader, because that would be fun.
That is not fun.
It might be too late. It might be too late. So.
Yeah, it's a good point, right? In that because of the NDP's decision, now we could see confidence votes come up several times as Parliament begins sitting next week, right, Kelvin? It's on
Monday. Yep.
Yeah, on Monday. So the chance of an election becomes far more likely really at any time. And so you're right, Trudeau may have run out of runway to even step back and have a new leader come in before the next election. He may not have much choice. I did find it interesting, let's just dwell on this for a moment with Mark Carney coming in. Kelvin, like, to me, if Mark Carney was going to come in, it should have been as, like, perhaps a leadership hopeful in an actual race, as opposed to, hey, come on in and, we'll say that we're doing something different, but to Andrew's point, probably not going to do anything different. How do you see Carney hopping in at this point as an advisor?
Yeah, I'm puzzled by it as well, because he had been flirting with the idea of running for leadership or not denying it when people have been asking over the last couple of years. And in some ways, I thought maybe he was trying to keep his distance from the Team Trudeau ship so that as it sinks, he can have his own viable chance at the leadership. But now he's certainly tying himself to the Trudeau regime here as this lead advisor on economic issues. And so, yeah, it is a little bit confusing. Maybe he doesn't actually want the leadership down the road. And I think in many ways, from a voter's perspective, the ideas that Carney brings and who he represents and what he stands for has many similarities and overlaps with what people don't like about Justin Trudeau at this point. Mm-hmm. They have a lot of that same background and similar stances on issues. And so I don't know whether there is actually going to be that much refresh happening with the Liberal brand because of bringing him onto the scene. We have to also note that there are these two major by-elections in Montreal and Winnipeg coming up this next week. And the Liberals stand to potentially lose a seat that they usually win by at least 20 percentage points in Montreal. The Bloc and the NDP are both challenging it. Right now, the Bloc are leading in the polls. And so there's been some talk about whether so there was a major defeat in Toronto back in summer that shook the Liberal world. And now if they lose this seat, there's some talk about leadership being at risk again, although some sources saying after the Liberal caucus retreat this last week that Liberals are still standing by Trudeau, but it's actually Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the NDP. If they don't win either of these seats in Winnipeg or Montreal in the by-election next week, that his leadership could be at risk. And if, like Andrew was just alluding to, if the NDP don't have a leader, I'm not sure we'll actually have much of a chance of an election that they're going to force a confidence or the government to fall in a confidence vote this fall.
Mm-hmm. It does put the Bloc in an interesting position, but also I feel like
they've got way more power now.
Yeah, but I feel like also federally, like, I don't know, does the Bloc care about such things? Anyway, I know I'm being flippant about something that's actually really important, but sometimes I really do wonder why we have a federal party that doesn't really want to be part of Canada anyway. So I'll just throw that one out there before we go to a break. Our American friends are probably wondering what the heck I'm talking about. So anyway, just Google that. Because we don't have time in this show to go over the Bloc Québécois. Okay, we do have to take a break. We're actually going to we've got a product spotlight today with Mark Smith, no relation, of Genesis Fertilizers. He has an accent, you guys, so obviously not related to me. And we're going to hop to that product spotlight, and then I'll bring the issues panel back in right after that. All right, so let's take a break, and we'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this. If you have a growing list of questions about getting more from your fields, know that Koch Agronomic Services has an answer for every acre. With a full spectrum of nutrient management, nutrient protection, and seed enhancement options, Koch Agronomic Services offers a deep portfolio of agronomically effective products. Each designed to enhance yield potential, all available to help solve your problems. Find the answer that's right for your acres. Start by visiting kochag.ca. That's KOCH ag.ca.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
Since 2010, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has been helping farmers to grow great wheat. Covering everything from markets, the latest research, pest and disease control, all the way down to on-farm trials, the Wheat School has everything your crop needs. Check out our massive video library on YouTube and grow great wheat with the Wheat School. Brought to you by Syngenta Canada, C&M Seeds, and Alberta Grains.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am Lyndsey Smith, your host for the day, and it is time for today's Product Spotlight. With me now is Mark Smith. He's the CFO of Genesis Fertilizers, and I should note, no relation. Right, Mark?
Correct.
Yeah, that we know of. I mean, maybe going back a ways. Who knows?
Yeah, it could be. Who knows?
It could be. All right. Okay, so let's get to it, though. Some exciting things happening, of course, with Genesis Fertilizers. As CFO, what are your focuses as CFO with this business?
Yeah, Lyndsey, thanks for the question. So, I mean, the Chief Financial Officer, you won't be surprised that it's about the money. So one of my controls, one of my key focuses on the controls of the business. At this point in time, we're raising equity from our investors and making quite crucial decisions about our engineering works and our licensing agreements. But on the horizon, we're looking to manage a very large project. So we're looking to spend roughly $2 billion over a 3-year period. And we clearly need to make sure that our controls mature and are ready for that challenge.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It is a sizable project, as we've discussed here on the show many times. Now, there is some news to bring involving PricewaterhouseCoopers. What role will Pricewaterhouse play as the financial advisor in the development of this proposed nitrogen fertilizer complex? And we'll add to that one, how does their expertise align with Genesis Fertilizers' vision for sustainability and low carbon production?
Yeah, so look, PricewaterhouseCoopers, they have a wealth of experience in raising funds for these large projects. And they also have a wealth of experience in carbon trading and the government incentive programs. So we've got a number of engagements with PwC. One of those is indeed to help us raise the capital for this project. So they will be supporting us in raising capital from strategic investors and also lenders to the planned project. They'll also be helping us navigate our way through the carbon trading regime and the government's incentive programs to support this kind of project.
Mm-hmm. That's certainly becoming an increasingly important part of any large-scale project, and certainly one of this scale. What then does this appointment of PwC, what does that mean for the project? What does that mean for investors?
Yeah, it's a positive development. We've been very careful with the choice of partner, both from a technology perspective and engineering perspective, to make sure we've got the right partners at the table. And we're doing the same with the financial advisory service. So PricewaterhouseCoopers are very well known, a reputable company. We're really delighted to be able to appoint them to support us. And in accepting this appointment, they would have had a look at our plans and the credibility of our plans. So we're, as I say, very pleased to appoint them for this support.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so in thinking about, the weeks ahead, the months ahead, and as you mentioned, you've had plenty of meetings on this, some town halls. There's a lot of meeting that's been happening to move this project forward. Looking into the next few months, what will keep you busy in the next few weeks?
Yeah, so I think we're concluding our basis of design. So what the plant will make. So that will mean negotiating our feed contract. So this is the front end engineering and design, and that's really, if you want to look at an analogy, it's like the plan to build the house. So it's what will our chemical plant look like? So we're at a very crucial stage in the contracting of that and making sure that that contract structure protects our investors. So that will keep us busy, and alongside that, we'll be doing the financial modelling ready for the capital raise. So those are the things that are, keeping us busy.
Absolutely. All right. And for farmers, investors, those interested in learning more about Genesis Fertilizers and that plan, where can they go for more information?
Yeah, I think they can go to our website. So I think there's a very good entry page into the Genesis Fertilizers website that can lead you to the contacts you need to speak to. The capital raise is being managed by Access Capital, and I think the website will point you in that direction.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, Mark Smith, CFO with Genesis Fertilizers. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you very much.
All right, and we'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
Whether you're in a career within an organization, starting your own business, looking for your dream job, running your own farm operation, operating a company in ag or food, or want to hone your overall life skills, this conference is for you. Celebrating over 10 years of bringing women in ag together, join the Advancing Women Conference in Niagara Falls on November 17th, 18th, and 19th. Visit advancingwomenconference.ca for more information and to register.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and the answer to your above-ground nitrogen loss problem is Anvol Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. To learn how Anvol's dual active ingredients deliver extended protection, visit kochag.ca. That's KOCHAG.ca. All right, bringing back in the issues panel, I've got Andrew Campbell out of Strathroy, Ontario, and Kelvin Heppner out of Altona, Manitoba. Let's talk drones because, well, they're pretty popular. This has definitely been a discussion this past summer on could we use them to apply pesticides? What can we do with them? I just last week actually had a field of cereal rye droned on to standing soybeans. Super cool stuff. But Kelvin, the U.S. is potentially grounding DJI drones, not just not allowing them to be imported, but grounding them. What's the story?
Yeah, so this week, the House of Representatives in the U.S. passed a bill that would ban future DJI drones from using communications infrastructure in the U.S. So that's where it's not just about imports, it's about actually being able to operate them in the U.S. So it's just passed in the House of Representatives. It still has to go through the rest of Congress, of course. So that's where it's not necessarily final. Still a ways to go here, but this is another example, I think, of where this U.S. versus China conflict and dispute, where there's more and more angles being added to the list every day, could potentially affect us here in Canada as well. And there's going to be pressure on the Canadian government to align with the U.S. on this type of policy. It certainly affects our supply chains and the market here in Canada. If something's not being introduced in the U.S. market, will it come to Canada as well? So there's all kinds of, and this is of course all under national security concerns, which trumps everything in the U.S. these days. It seems national security is top of the list, and so there's concern that these DJI drones coming from China are potentially, or could potentially down the road be used to collect information on the U.S. and so that's where or even potentially be controlled from afar, that type of thing. So some of this is maybe coming from more of a sci-fi type scenario, but that's where we're at with this legislation passing in the House of Representatives in the U.S. this week.
So Andrew, I mean, like to that point, we're talking about, again, I mean, a country can use national security as its reason for a lot of things. I think that, yes, you can make the case for such a thing, but this is, grounding technology that we need. Yes, it's in the U.S., but do you see Canada being pressured to follow suit on this one?
Oh, absolutely. I think if the U.S. continues to move forward, maybe it's not immediately. Like I think, as Kelvin said, there's a timeline here that has to follow, and so I think if for whatever reason this does actually get passed, then very naturally will that come up in future conversations between the US and Canada that says, okay, well, you also should be doing this. I mean, we've seen it in kind of countless areas. Huawei is the one that kind of comes to mind first as being the one that's most connected to it when we talk about communication and control a device and all that kind of stuff. I think what's different about this that it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, is that Huawei wasn't necessarily a leader in this technology in telecommunications. DJI is, like, they would hold, and I don't have the numbers, but just in seeing them around here, like, they would have the most market share. They would be the ones, the vast majority, especially when we do talk about, you know, the ones that I don't know, Lyndsey, you mentioned, you know, seeding on.
DJI.
That, right?
Yeah.
It was a DJI.
Yeah.
Like, the ones that have that ability to do, you know, I've seen ones where agronomists are, you know, mapping fields and doing stand counts. They're DJIs. So I think what will be unique about this conversation, you know, that will be different than past ones is what do you do when they do have such a large market share and aren't just in the area where, oh, if you don't use this device instead. Yeah. I think you're going to have some concerns from people who are in the area of, you know, things like search and rescue. Like, how do you evolve that when, you know, there are government organizations even that I'm sure are using it in really important operations. So I think it is one where when you see that and the initial response is, oh yeah, that makes sense because it follows the trajectory that the US has done for a number of years. I think there is the caveat in this conversation that, well, what do you do if all of a sudden you pull out 50% of the drones out of the market?
Yeah. And maybe, or more. Yeah, you're right. It is the vast majority. I'm glad you brought up the search and rescue. Like, this isn't banning TikTok, right? Where lots of fun, great trends. Sure, there's learning components to TikTok, but let's face it, it's an excellent way to waste time and be entertained. Not saying that's, you know, worthless, but it's not the same as necessarily a technology tool that's being used for exactly that. Agriculture applications for surveying and mapping, and yes, search and rescue. So, and actually I just saw this week someone who did a trial run of how these drones can be used to potentially find people, thinking about kids that get lost in cornfields or these sorts of things. Like, this is a very real thing. And, you know, having a drone that's capable of doing these things is actually really important and can really change these things. At the same time, as we've mentioned, there isn't necessarily a company waiting with the exact same or complete replacement technology that's either from Canada or the US that can just step in and fulfill this market. So it's definitely a concern, I would say, for sure. Now, Kelvin, that does bring up, though. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Kelvin.
Yeah, I was going to, maybe your transition, I think we're thinking along the same lines here. There are some other examples, though, where the US-China conflict is also affecting potentially us here in Canada and Canadian agriculture and agriculture across North America. One would be on the 2,4-D side of things. That's where the US this week, the Department of Commerce came out with its proposed countervail duties on 2,4-D coming from China and India. They're still investigating on the anti-dumping side of things, so there could potentially be steep tariffs applied as soon as next year, it sounds like, on 2,4-D products coming into the U.S., which the Canadian government at this point, we're not seeing any signs that the Canadian government is aligning on that so far. But of course, the supply chain in North American supply market is highly integrated. So that's where the 2,4-D side of things is something to pay attention to here as well. That's one where Corteva does produce 2,4-D containing herbicides in North America. So it would be to their benefit not having these imports coming from China, these generic herbicides coming from China and India.
Mm-hmm. So, and it does also work in, and Kelvin, you've mentioned it, but the timing, as we think about this, we are ticking down to that July 2026 potential review of CUSMA and or potentially a full-on renegotiation. So the more of these components that are perhaps still undecided as we move further or closer to that date means that they could become, you know, points of discussion between Canada and the US and trying to get Canada on the same side. So this is there are a lot of issues that are starting to stack up here beyond the typical irritants between Canada and the US.
Yeah, and even just this morning, we saw the White House issue an executive order on de minimis policy, which I believe is like when you import stuff that's below a certain value, it basically doesn't get applied duties on that type of thing. And if you think of the amount of online purchasing, shopping that happens where you the package, I know in our household we sometimes get stuff online and it says gift on the label. Well, it wasn't a gift, but they labeled that so it avoided avoided duties. And it sounds like the White House is going to crack down on that as well. And like you said, Lyndsey, in the upcoming North American trade negotiations, we've been talking about where Canada has potentially cards to play. In a lot of ways, it seems like the U.S. has a lot of leverage on Canada, but maybe if Canada doesn't implement some of these policies right away, there might be a strategic sense to offering that alignment as part of a renegotiated USMCA or CUSMA deal, where Canada could say, sure, we'll act like you are on all these China files in exchange for these other things that we want. That could be a card that Canada could play here in terms of having the new North American trade deal basically become more of a firewall against China, and having Canada and Mexico join the U.S. in that.
Mm-hmm. Andrew, we had, I just switched the poll today. So, but our poll last week on the website was about how Canadians feel that Canada should be dealing with China. The winner in that one, if we can call it that, was that Canada should be more strategic and be playing chess, not checkers, with China. Would you agree with that? Is that where you would sit? How does that fit into, as Kelvin, talks about perhaps aligning with the U.S. on the CUSMA deal in sort of a united front against China?
Well, I think that's the challenge is really we're playing off these two superpowers. Is I think the real challenge is that if we do more strategic things with China and maybe don't go along with the U.S. in certain areas, then okay, maybe it avoids something like kind of trade issues with canola or a whole host of other things. But the challenge is we know that this CUSMA agreement is coming up, and that we will pay a price if we are not lined up. At the same time is then if we do line up with the U.S., then obviously China is going to probably hit back harder on us than even the U.S. They will use it as a lesson, in my view, against, kind of other countries doing, kind of similar actions. So I think it really puts us between that rock and a hard place in which is the right, thing to do. My view, it is a challenge, but there's so much that we're integrated with the U.S. in, is that how do you kind of try to do this strategically, and then probably you end up, if you do play too much, you probably end up with them both mad, and then they're both adding all of these tariffs. So it is one of those challenges, is that we just talked about DJI. When you start to see that kind of thing, like, well, I hope Canada's starting to look at that, because that's going to come up in a conversation. And it's almost a case of like, well, you almost have to pick a side now, or else you're really going to put a lot of things in jeopardy come, 2026 or maybe sooner. It's incredible how quickly this is ramping up, this tit for tat discussion in so many areas, this protectionist mentality. This is one where we thought maybe we could avoid some things. Like what has happened over the last 12 months is remarkable, and it shows not signs of slowing down, but only speeding up in what is going to be added to these lists.
Mm-hmm. So, and we'll take a quick break here, but this to me really does speak to, Kelvin, to your column about, and the way you framed it with Trudeau making a decision here, is that it's not good for Canada to be in this state of political limbo. Like we need, and Andrew, I think you've done a great job of outlining why we need strong leadership now to prepare for what's ahead in the next 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and I know you said break, but I'm going to interject because I think this is one of the challenges that Trudeau has had almost the entire time, is he tries to be too friends with too many people along the way and tries to just make everybody happy. We are coming into an era in Canada where we cannot do this anymore. We have to start picking sides. And the reality is some people are not going to be happy and it's not going to go great, but at least we can say this is the decision. This is why we made this decision, and commit to it. That's what we actually are going to need in Canada over the next few years.
Well said. I will allow it. All right, we're going to take a break, and we'll be back with more of the Issues Panel here on RealAg Radio right after this.
Apply anhydrous ammonia and protect your application earlier than normal this fall. Defend against potential losses and protect your bottom line with Centuro Nitrogen Stabilizer. Patented active ingredient pronitridine offers agronomically effective protection where it matters most, below ground. Easy to handle Centuro is also non-corrosive for fewer worries about downtime or equipment damage. Start early with Centuro as part of your nitrogen management plan. Contact your local retailer or visit centuro.ca for more information today.
RealAg Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomic Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays will cover a broad range of issues. Thursday we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire. And we'll wrap things up Fridays with the RealAg Issues Panel with Kelvin Heppner and Lyndsey Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern. And don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am Lyndsey Smith, your host, and this segment is brought to you by Centuro Nitrogen Stabilizer. Protect your anhydrous ammonia, and bottom line, even if temperatures hit 15 degrees or below, that's not too late to apply agronomically effective, non-corrosive Centuro Nitrogen Stabilizer. Learn more at centuro.ca. That's CENTURO.ca. All right. Bringing in the issues panel, we've got Andrew Campbell and Kelvin Heppner. Let's start with, well, first of all, happy birthday to Lawrence Macaulay this week. Kelvin, how old is our Ag Minister?
He turned 78 on September 9th. So, yes, happy birthday to Minister Macaulay.
He did not celebrate in China, however. Should
no, that
he have?
Well, that's one of his predecessor, former Agriculture Minister Jerry Ritz on Twitter, or X, I guess as we should call it now, said that Minister Macaulay should be on a plane to Beijing to address the canola anti-dumping investigation and resolve it, I guess, in person. Minister Ritz saying that in person seemed to yield better results in the past. And so I guess, of course, being somewhat critical of the way the Liberal government has responded to the Chinese anti-dumping investigation on canola.
Do you think this government was surprised by this announced investigation?
Industry, I know we were talking about it for a long time. I think farmers in every coffee shop were talking about it when Canada announced the tariffs on EVs. Oh no, what's going to happen to canola? Or maybe pork could be touched by this. Beef, of course, is still restricted from Canada into China from past issues, but canola has been hit other times, and so I don't think it came as a surprise to many people in the industry when China announced that anti-dumping investigation last week. But at the same time, we have heard from reliable source that people inside Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, the brass at AAFC, were somewhat taken aback because they had some assurance for some reason that agriculture wouldn't be affected in this. So that leads us, I don't know, it's puzzling where they got that message or signal from, but it's something that we're definitely looking into because China this week announced the official details and launch of that anti-dumping investigation. It's going to take up to a year. They could even extend it another 6 months, similar to the Australian barley case from a couple of years ago. And so right now, that timeline now, we're trying to read between the lines, I think, on a lot of things here as to what China's intent is and whether we'll actually see tariffs. Right now, of course, we've seen the futures market and canola values depressed because of this, but we haven't actually seen tariffs or any new restrictions implemented here with this anti-dumping investigation on canola from Canada. And so that's something I think the market is trying to figure out, and certainly grain companies are talking to their Chinese customers, trying to sort through what they see as the scenario down the road here too. But yeah, we've been told that Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada officials were actually not expecting this to happen.
Andrew, you look as perplexed. For those watching on YouTube, you'll have noticed Andrew had his outside face on, wondering what the heck.
Oh, yeah, we're on camera, aren't we?
Yeah,
as well?
camera.
Oh,
okay. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
That is shocking to me that they would think otherwise. Because as Kelvin said, I don't know any market conversation I was a part of, in that window, even ahead of it when they were just discussing about what the tariffs would be on EV. The first thing everybody said is, okay, here's where the markets are now. That is under the assumption that China doesn't do anything, but we assume they will. We just don't know what, so we can't factor it in to the canola market. that is the only thing that, as you said, Kelvin, like maybe it was pork instead because they wanted something different. But like inventories in China are fine. They're getting enough supply from other areas. It's not like the price is wildly like it. To them, it seems like that easy target, and the one they have proven that they will go after over and over and over again. So I hadn't heard that, Kelvin. So that is why I have my outside face on, is because that is shocking to me. If they had gone anywhere outside of Ottawa and talked to anyone, everybody else would have assumed that this is what was going to happen, or some version of it.
Like, this is something that I think is a developing story here, and so we don't have confirmed details. But to me, that it either is one of two scenarios. Either staff at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada there's not the depth there that there used to be. Maybe I'm not sure where they aren't as aware of this file as what they should be. That is something that this Liberal government, again, going back to what we talked about earlier, there's been a lot of turnover in the staff. The original highly ambitious staff that were working for this in high bureaucratic roles and have moved on in a lot of cases, but bureaucracy hasn't changed that much. It's more the minister's offices that have seen that turnover. So I'm not sure if we can attribute it to that, or was there a signal somewhere from the Chinese ambassador, or we know that Melanie Joly, the foreign affairs minister, was in China this summer. Was there a signal somewhere from the Chinese that they wouldn't hit Canadian agriculture, and there was some a certain amount of faith attributed to that signal? I'm not sure. That's something that I think we need to dig into and find out more here in the coming months.
So yeah, and to that point, I mean, it is possible that Joly did have assurances, but perhaps they had strings attached, and it was that Canada not put 100% EV tariffs. Yeah. And she may have sat down with the Prime Minister and said, we can't do this. And the Prime Minister said, yes, we are. And who knows? So that's just it. We're not privy to that conversation. But the timing of Joly's visit it was just before this EV announcement. And then, of course, shortly after this investigation was launched. So it is entirely possible, Kelvin, that conversation happened and we got assurances, but we don't know what strings were attached potentially. And perhaps if that's the case, then we really tick them off. And I'm not entirely surprised. So,
or do we read that as they're not actually going to, maybe they don't actually intend to put tariffs in place. Maybe they just wanted all the headlines that they got last week and to shock the market and depress prices for canola that they could buy. Mm-hmm. There are some concerns, like market analysts are talking about where the Chinese crush plants going to source their canola if they continue to recognize blackleg as an issue coming from the Australian crop. And so there are some, I guess it could also lend credence to the idea that maybe China, this is all about headlines and sending a signal, not necessarily actually moving ahead with restrictions in the future. Maybe that's just the optimistic take here. I'm not sure.
I do wonder, though, in that situation, the challenge is like, because this is such a long timeline, because we're 12 to 18 months from any decision that happens, I think the position we now put this in is that the clock has started ticking, and we've got a whole host of other things that we may be introducing against China, as we talked about in the last segment. And so it is one of those cases of even if that's not the plan now, that goes again to the assumption that, okay, as long as nothing else changes, then maybe it'll be fine. I just don't think over 18 months, it's going to be a long 18 months in terms of new introductions.
Well, and realistically, the tanking of the market cost a lot of people, so a lot of farmers, money. How long does that go on for? And we're not even going to delve into would there be compensation for farmers? That is another show, but we are going to talk about it. Okay, just not today, everybody. We will, because we have a few minutes left. I do want to touch on, because for a while, inflation was our favorite word on the show, right, Kelvin? Now it's productivity. So I do want to talk about Canada's productivity problem. That's Kelvin's next tattoo, will be productivity. David Coletto with Abacus Data, good friend of the show. He had a series of tweets this week. Yes, I'm still calling them tweets. I don't care what anyone says. They did some surveying on how Canadians feel about profit, about companies making money. Is profit a four-letter word? There were surprising results, I think, in here, Kelvin. Walk us through the results. We'll talk about them now.
Yeah, the majority of Canadians responding to this Abacus poll, this research that they've been doing, Coletto and his team have been doing, the majority, 66% of overall Canadians said that corporate profits are often too excessive and come at the expense of workers and consumers. 34% say that maximizing profits should be the primary goal of every private business and should drive it. So that to me is saying that Canadians, basically what Coletto said is that profit has become a bad word in many Canadian circles, and he actually broke it down by party loyalty. And it's actually, you'd think that Conservative Party supporters would generally be more in the small business and corporate profit motivated type crowd. 60% of Conservative voters, according to Abacus, said that corporate profits are too excessive and come at the expense of workers and consumers. And so I don't know, to me, I can understand when we see the CEOs receiving compensation that is exponentially higher than the average worker. I can understand the concerns about that disparity and inequality, but at the same time, profit has to be, people don't invest in increasing productivity in businesses, in growing their business, unless there is a profit motive. That is the motive, is to earn money, to invest in things that you want, that kind of thing. And so to me, if we're undervaluing profit, and if profit has become a bad word, what does that say about future investment and productivity growth here in Canada?
Mm-hmm. Now, Andrew, you're a dairy farmer, so you do it for the love of the job, right? You do not need any money to pay bills.
No, I love it that much.
You're right.
I think it is this challenge in terms of what does profit mean, and it goes to a whole host of different subjects. But when you talk about profit, it's, what do people count as too excessive? Yeah. I think this is that challenge. Is we do have, I think there are companies that are just seen as making, when all of a sudden you get, banks making billions, versus another company that's making, millions, or a small business that's making, a few $100,000 or whatever that scale is. I think it's really hard for a lot of Canadians to, truly define. So that would actually be, when you're talking to David next time, I'd be very interested to know what is the line? Is there actually a line in the sand that says too excessive? Because it is too excessive that the CEO gets paid $100 million. That actually, maybe it is one of those cases. If I could actually say, is that too excessive? Maybe. Is it a case of just profit in general is a bad word? I think that's really the big mark, the big question that I would still have to go along with that, with this data, that I just be interested to know. Is it profit that is the bad word, or is excessive actually the bad word? And what is that actually defined to in a Canadian's mind? Exactly.
And that is, I think, part of the slippery part of this is like, who gets to decide what's too much? I think when we go to extremes, I think most people would say, like, what on earth are you doing with all that money? Is that really in the best interest that, as the CEO, you got $1 billion? And I'm completely making that number up. But, what are you doing with that? At the same time, to me, it's also a bit of a slippery slope of saying, do we hamper productivity if there isn't a reward for doing better? And I think that it's fair, of course, to talk about in the face of consumers or their workers, et cetera. But it is this balancing point of, what is too much and who gets to decide that. So definitely a really good follow-up question, I think, Andrew, is trying to delve into where we think is too much. But I mean, I'll have you know, I don't think any of us want to work for free. And I think it's an important part of the conversation is the people that, sometimes go into extreme debt and work very long hours to create a company that then hires people. If you work for another company, somebody had to move forward and build that company. And should we really expect that somebody's going to do that for nothing? And honestly, that is how we have jobs and we have economy and we have growth, is by companies have to be sustainable, and sustainable includes profit. So that's a really important part. Incredibly complicated. We've got to end it there. Thank you both so much for joining me on this issues panel. Sean, who? Honestly. Anyway, although we were talking in the break about the 1988 Olympics, I could have really used someone older than the two of you to commiserate with me about Elizabeth Manley. But anyway,
Because
Andrew,
Lawrence McCall has been in the House of Commons
since 1988.
1988.
And these two babies had no idea about what 1988 was like. Anyway, all right, Kelvin, have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you, both of you and everyone listening as well.
All right, and Andrew, I hope you get some much-needed R&R after all that haymaking.
I plan on it. Thanks, Lyndsey. Thanks, Kelvin.
All right. Okay, thank you so much for listening here to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. We'll talk to you on Tuesday, everybody. Cheers.
Thank you for downloading this episode, brought to you by Breck Young. Check out their new BY7204LL canola with Pod Defender shatter tolerance and Defender rated club root protection. Talk to your local retailer today.